Hello everyone and welcome to Hospitality Success in a Post-Brexit World, a webinar hosted by Procter & Gamble Professional and in partnership with the British Hospitality Association. So, the purpose of today's webinar is twofold. Firstly, we are aiming to help those involved in the hospitality industry prepare for the challenges and opportunities that will arise as a result of Brexit. And secondly, it's about encouraging and fostering industry discussion and debate. So the presentation today will be in three parts. First of all, we're going to examine the hospitality industry as a sector and really show its resilience in the face of adversity. Next, we'll be looking at the economic factors that will, of course, result from Brexit. And finally, we'll be looking at the secret success of the hospitality sector, which of course is the people and staff who run it. So without further delay, I'm delighted to introduce you to our speaker panel today, who will share their wealth of experience with you. First of all, in the room here today with me, I have Bob Cotton, who is the former Chief Executive of the British Hospitality Association and former Tourism Advisor to the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. Today, he's a member of the P&G Professional's Expert Advisory Council, which has been set up to help identify opportunities for industry improvement. I also am delighted to welcome John Guthrie, Employment and Skills Advisor at the British Hospitality Association. And John is an expert in human resources across the pubs, restaurants and hotel sector. We also have in the room today with us, I'm very happy to welcome Kate Nicholls, who is the Chief Executive of UK Hospitality. And finally, we have Renee Buchanan, the Communications Manager of P&G Professional. So Bob, I'd love you to get us started today on the sector.
Fine, thanks very much, Daisy. Good afternoon, everyone. Some of you may know me. I'm delighted to say I've actually been working in this industry for actually over 50 years now. I started off actually as a commis chef at Blenheim Palace, and I've worked as a chef, then with Trust House, 40 Gardner Merchant, unit manager, district manager, regional director, director of communications, marketing, etc., through to my more recent career. So I've been in hospitality all my life, and haven't I been fortunate to have chosen an industry which has shown almost continuous growth over the 50 years that I've been working in it. I could have joined the coal industry, the steel industry, or some other industry, and unbeknown to myself, it could have almost disappeared. So first of all, we should celebrate all those of us that work in the hospitality industry because of its resilience, its opportunities for people to advance, particularly great careers from the bottom right through to the top, and the continuous growth. And I want to mention the continuous growth because since the financial crisis of 2008, I think hospitality and tourism uniquely has shown growth every year in the UK since 2008. Now that really is some record. And it's not just about growth in turnover, it's about providing jobs. And those of us who can remember back to 2008-9 were told that we were going to have high levels of unemployment. Our unemployment levels would reach those of mainland Europe. We looked at Spain at 40% unemployed for the young, etc., etc. So providing jobs at that time was a critical issue. And, it's great to see that hospitality has continued to provide more and more work opportunities. And the great thing about this industry is that it provides what government likes to think of is job opportunities for some of the more difficult groups. So people straight from school. So it's a great job opportunity for young people straight from school. We employ a large number of people with disabilities. We've got job opportunities for those who've retired and then want to start another career, older people. Great opportunities for women. So all those sectors that actually require opportunity, hospitality provides. And most of all, it isn't just opportunity opportunities in city centres and the main cities like London. It's spread right across the country. In every constituency of Britain, in every region of Britain, there are hospitality services and there are job opportunities. So those are very big pluses for hospitality. However, it's not without its challenges, and obviously Brexit is bringing a number of issues for us to really focus on, and we're going to look at those in a little bit more detail in due course. But there are the political challenges to face ahead, which I know Kate and John will refer to in their presentations. But there are other issues which I will cover later on, which impact on the day-to-day business. But in conclusion, I just want to say two things about business today and business in the future. One, in a global way, looking at hospitality as a whole, I have to say I'm a half-full man when it comes to being optimistic. I take the view that the most critical thing about a hospitality business is employers putting their people first. This is a people business, and the winning businesses are the ones that recognise the importance of their people. If Brexit does nothing else, it will put the focus back on people in a hospitality business. So for that, I think I give a big tick. The focus is back on people, not just capital and money. Secondly, I say to everyone involved in the hospitality businesses, there are big issues ahead. There are governmental issues. There are trade association issues to focus on and to get it right. But for every individual business owner, focus on your own business. Get your business right. Be the best at what you do in your village, in your town, in your street, and you will find success because there is plenty of opportunity out there. So perhaps now I'd just like to hand over to Kate, who will talk about some of these challenges ahead. Kate.
Thank you very much. I think we should probably do a quick tally as to how many years' experience we've got sitting in the room. I feel as though it's incumbent upon me to add to that. So I've spent all of my working life in hospitality and politics. So I've been fortunate enough to combine my two passions. So I've got 25 years worth of experience. Bob's got over 50. John, how many have you got?
35.
35. So there you go. You've got almost 150 years worth of experience sitting around a table. It's my huge privilege to now be the Chief Executive of UK Hospitality, which has been created from a merger of the ALMR, which represented pubs, bars and restaurants, and the British Hospitality Association, which represents hotels, contract catering, and the broader tourism and visitor attraction industry. And I think it's a unique moment in time, just as that new body is launching, to be talking to you here today. And we've got a slide that just talks about the big macroeconomic environment. So Bob talked particularly about people and about the small businesses and the employment that we have at a local level. This slide just gives you a bit of a bigger macroeconomic flavour. It's the kind of chart that you take in when I go in as your champion and your voice to government to put the case for why hospitality is so important. This slide actually looks a bit bigger. It looks at the overall tourism industry, which is key. If you look at what's happening with Brexit, the future of our business and the future of tourism is dependent on the performance of the British exchange rate. And actually that has driven quite a lot of growth of inbound tourism over recent years. But the engine room of tourism and how valuable it is to the UK economy is hospitality. Pubs, bars, restaurants, nightclubs, hotels, contract catering services. That is the bedrock, and that's the economic powerhouse. So you can see there that tourism generates just under 10% of UK GDP. Almost all of that, from an economic perspective, comes from the tourism sector. It's a £130 billion industry, and by 2025, we will account for over 60%, almost two-thirds of tourism revenue that's coming in there will be generated by those core hospitality businesses. 130 billion, if you put it in the context for ministers, which is what's my job to do, that's more than fashion and the creative industries combined. It's a real economic powerhouse. In terms of the contribution we make to the Exchequer every year, it's £40 billion that we contribute in tax alone. That goes straight back to the Exchequer, the equivalent of the entire defence budget, or the equivalent of the government's entire net debt repayments, or to put it in the context of Brexit, if if you believe the figures you read in the press, 40 billion is what we will pay as a Brexit divorce bill, and it comes directly from our sector. That's the amount that we contribute. More importantly, in the context of Brexit as well, it's jobs. So 10% of UK GDP, 5% of UK employment, and almost 80% of those tourism jobs come from hospitality. So it's just under 3 million jobs that we have, and as Bob rightly said, at every part of the country, every skill level, and 2/3 of those jobs are semi-skilled, something that people do not give us enough credit for and that we are making the case to ministers about. And why is it important in the context of Brexit? Because ours is a sunrise industry. We are continuing to grow. We are forecast to continue to grow throughout the next 10 years, and we will continue to deliver those jobs. So hospitality over the last decade has delivered 1 in 6 of all net new jobs, and we're forecast to continue to do that going forward. So we're the 3rd largest private sector employer in the UK, twice the size of financial services, and more than automotive, pharmaceuticals and aeronauticals combined. So 20% of all jobs have increased since 2010, and we are well placed to take advantage of some of the Brexit opportunities, provided that we have a supportive regulatory environment in which to grow. Which brings me on to sort of the next slide, which is mainly our challenges, the key areas of focus, and Bob and John in particular will go into these in a lot more detail. Yes, the industry is concerned about Brexit, but actually what we're more concerned about on a day-to-day basis at the moment, and what we're continuing to fight with government, is about having the headroom to continue to invest in our people, have the space to grow, to manage the migration challenges that Brexit poses. And the top issues of the day, business rates, it's the cost of property, it's can you afford to pay the bills that the councils are imposing upon you. We know that we're going to have to find another 150 million in April. Secondly, it's the costs of employment. Labour costs on average are about 30% of turnover. So it's not just the apprenticeship levy, it's all the additional costs of national living wage, national minimum wage, the interpretation of uniforms policy around that, apprenticeship levy, pensions, all of those kind of things coming to hit the businesses. We are primarily property and people heavy, and so those regulatory costs squeeze the margin and stop us investing and growing. And then obviously fighting to make sure the government's migration rules allow us to have that headroom to manage our way through that. That's a very quick snapshot from me of my in-tray at the moment as I fight your battles when I go into government. And I'll hand over to John, who's going to talk in a little bit more. Sorry, Bob. Okay.
Thank you, Kate.
Apologies.
What I want to set out now is perhaps some of what I term the budgetary type issues, the monetary issues, before John actually gets into a little bit of detail on the employment issues. I always say to people, when we're looking for indicators of what Brexit might bring to both our sector and to the British economy as a whole, the first indicator I watch very carefully, and I'm watching at the moment, and I shall be watching in the future, is the exchange rate. Exchange rates are fundamental, not just to the performance of the UK economy, but also to hospitality and tourism in particular. And I think as we build up through the Brexit negotiations and beyond, we should all be watching the exchange rate with extreme care. The reason I say this is, from experience, if I can give you an example, if we've watched tourism movements, for example, over the last 10 years of people coming in from America into Britain, we know that if the exchange rate moves above $1.50 pound, that starts to have a severe impact on Americans coming to Britain. Obviously, if it's weaker, lots of Americans come. The same with the pound and the euro with the rate there. Exchange rates are really important because it is the exchange rate that actually triggers whether people come to this country. I have to say, it isn't about the rate of BHA or the cost of living in a country or whatever. It is the exchange rate in the first instance which triggers in someone's mind, oh, let's go and visit somewhere. And at the moment, of course, tourism and hospitality, we've had a real benefit in the last year, 18 months, and that's why the figures are so strong. And they're strong twofold. One is because with a weakened sterling level, Britain has been a great place to visit from America, from the Far East, from the Middle East, and from Europe. So we see the numbers particularly strong into London. And secondly, of course, it has the reverse effect for domestic people thinking about whether they take an overseas holiday. So the word staycation has come into fashion, and we've seen a really strong growth in people staying at home, taking domestic holidays, and that has had a real impact in the regions and the seaside resorts. So we've seen growth on that front. So exchange rate is really important in that area. Secondly, exchange rate has a direct impact on food costs. And whichever way we look at it in a hospitality business, if you're running a restaurant, pub restaurant, restaurants in hotels, food inflation is a very key indicator. And of course, what we're finding at the moment is because probably half our food is imported, we are importing increased food costs. And that has an impact on our cost structures in our businesses. So food inflation is something to watch at the moment. When a deal is complete, and world food markets tend to be at a lower price than European food, we may have some opportunity to mitigate this, but that is an unknown at this stage. So we need to follow food costs for the future. Really important for all food businesses. And of course, the third impact on the exchange rate is on our labour costs. Because we have so many overseas workers working in this country at the moment, whether they be from Europe or further afield, with a lower exchange rate, of course, what they earn in this country is actually less money, because so many of them come here to work for a short-term period or send money home. Good example is I heard in the other day some Polish workers complaining that the amount of money they were sending home now was substantially less than they were able to send home 2 years ago. So it actually is actually having that sort of impact on an attractiveness of working in this country because of wage rates. So that's why exchange rate is so critical. We then need to just explore one or two other areas of where I think Brexit is going to have a significant impact. I've mentioned already that 30% of probably all your costs in a food service business is food. Obviously, the other major cost is labour, as Kate has already mentioned. I can say most hotels now are running between perhaps 33–35%. So wage costs and the potential wage inflation or lack of wage or lack of people around in the future is going to be perhaps the most significant issue in due course. Have we got the right supply of labour? Can we get the right supply of labour? Where does it come from? Does it have the right skills? Can we get the right productivity from them? How do we encourage more of the UK indigenous workforce to join the hospitality sector and not be so dependent on overseas labour? Labour is probably the second biggest item, and that is why getting the right deal in the future on any visa programme or whatever the government ends up with is so important, because it is certain that the hospitality industry will not be able to exist without some form of visa programme to bring people in from overseas, not just from Europe, but obviously further afield as well. So perhaps at this stage, I hand over to John, who might go through some of the challenges that we're going to face on post-Brexit issues with our labour force.
Thanks very much indeed, and good afternoon, everybody. What I'd like to do is just focus on three areas to do with people in our industry: availability, labour costs, and the whole area of skills development. So first of all, let's deal with the issue about availability. Those of you who read newspapers and watch the television news will realise that the whole sort of agenda on Brexit is sort of changing literally by the day and by the week. I think it's fair for businesses to plan on the basis of freedom of movement in its current form continuing until the end of 2020. That's a probability. It's not definite. We're coming out of the European Union next March. We've legislated for that, and we're hoping to agree a transitional deal that would take us through to the end of December 2020. It's a probability. It's not definite. From the beginning of 2021, a new immigration regime will come in for people who are based in the European Union. And it is fair for us to conclude that the immigration regime will be more restrictive for our industry than has been the case under freedom of movement. There's a body called the Migration Advisory Committee, which is going to report in September this year with its recommendations for what should be the policy. The government are likely to publish a white paper shortly thereafter, and then there will be legislation going through Parliament during 2019 and 2020. Whether or not we're going to be successful in arguing that we need continuing access to a European workforce is going to be heavily influenced by the political mood at the time. The Conservative government are much more inclined to restrict immigration from the European Union for industries like our own. The Labour Party position is developing, it's evolving, but they seem more inclined to address public concern about wage levels by going for substantial increases in the national minimum wage and the national living wage to reassure the public that large-scale immigration is not undercutting wages for UK workers. So whichever scenario you take, a restriction on availability or higher national living wages is going to have a significant impact on labour costs. And I'll come on to that in a moment. Just a final couple of points on availability. We've got to think about the demand for labour and the supply. The demand for labour from our industry is, of course, for two reasons. One is because we are recruiting to replace those who have left, the net replacement rate. And the second is because of the growth in our industry that Bob has referred to and Kate. The biggest reason for recruitment is because of our high level of labour turnover. And businesses that are able to reduce their labour turnover will be those that secure a definite and enduring competitive advantage. And I'll come back to that later on. Let's move on to labour costs. Now, labour costs are going up for a number of reasons. There is government intervention, so the national minimum wage, the national living wage, introduced from April 2016, the auto-enrolment pensions policy, the apprenticeship levy, which is having an impact on businesses with a pay bill of more than £3 million a year. So there are substantial reasons why, because of government regulation, cost is going up. Secondly, in many labour markets today, there is real pressure on wage rates because of a very, very tight labour supply. We've got very low unemployment in the UK at about 4.4%, and certainly the employment rate, that is the percentage of those of the population of working age who are in employment, stands at just over 76%, and that's the highest since these records began 41 years ago. So a more restrictive immigration policy will have the effect of tightening the labour supply, and all other things being equal, will help to contribute to real pressure on pay rates. And of course, other costs, business rates that Bob and Kate referred to, food inflation, etc., because of the devaluation of sterling, businesses will be facing a real storm of higher costs, and in many consumer-facing businesses, a very, very demanding commercial environment as the squeeze on real incomes is set to continue. Now, because of this real pressure on wage costs and the overall employment costs, businesses now need to have a real focus on productivity. And productivity is not just about effective utilization and deployment of people. It's also about human capabilities, what your workforce is capable of contributing, their morale, their motivation, and their preparedness to go the extra mile for the operation and for the business. And productivity is inextricably linked with our third broad area, which is that of building skills, because a better trained, more skilled, more knowledgeable workforce will be more productive and will increase the revenue per employee. And that's the only long-term sustainable way to break out of a high-cost environment, is to become a highly productive environment. And the government are attaching in their industrial strategy huge importance to the increase in productivity. For our industry, we're very, very hopeful that we can secure a highly valuable and prestigious sector deal with the government. And one of the things the government is really looking for from the industry is to see a massive and transformational improvement in productivity. Now, there was some concern about the introduction of the apprenticeship levy from last April, and it's certainly the case that it took a number of months for businesses to really digest the implication of the apprenticeship levy. There was a reduction, according to most training providers, in the number of new apprenticeship starts after April, but in recent months, the number of apprenticeships are now at the pre-levy rate. And it looks as if businesses have got hold of the regulations and the bureaucracy that go with the apprenticeship levy, are now able to draw from their digital account and are investing in apprenticeships at all levels, levels 2 to 5, and most importantly, at all ages. So the investment in apprenticeships we strongly support, and we strongly support the government's desire to introduce T-levels alongside the A-level. We want those introduced as quickly as possible. We're working quite intensively with the Department for Education on that, and we're writing to member companies, inviting people really knowledgeable about life and work in the hospitality industry to sit on a number of technical panels in the design of T-levels. Because for too long, this country has had too much of a focus on academic education and academic pathways. It's really simple. You just do A-levels and then you go to university if you're academically inclined. But if you're vocationally inclined, you're faced with a bewildering array of FE colleges, T-levels, diplomas, apprenticeships, NVQs, and the pathways have not been as clear for people vocationally oriented as opposed to those who are academically oriented. Happily, that's about to change with a substantial focus on vocational education. So in conclusion, I don't think the environment for hospitality businesses in my working career has ever been, more demanding. And I started my working career in 1979. It really is hugely demanding. But I agree very much with one of the thoughts that Bob offered, which is that people, the recruitment, development, selection or promotion, and remuneration of people has never been more important for businesses. And it is those businesses that are really able to get their people strategies right that will secure a enduring competitive advantage. And they are the businesses that will break out from this very demanding policy agenda. Those are the businesses that will break out and succeed. So I'm going to hand over to Bob, who is going to talk about Unsung Heroes.
Fine. Thanks very much, John. And I'd just like to pick up on a couple of points John has made, and I really want to reiterate, because it does relate to hospitality businesses now and in the future particularly. And that is about how important it is about selecting, recruiting, developing, and then retaining the staff in your businesses. Quite frankly, if we solved the retention issue in hospitality, we wouldn't have a recruitment problem. The figures I know of, never mind the official figures I see, relate to many businesses with over 100% turnover per annum. That is not an exaggeration. If we solved the retention problem, we would have solved many of our future issues relating to labour. I know it's a challenge, but we really have to get it under focus. And it is all about spending time recruiting the right people. Spend that extra time to make sure you get the right people in. Then when you have them, give them the right skills, mentor them, develop them, train them, and then hang on to them. Because I can tell you in my experience, people leave people. It's how you're managed. If you're well managed, you don't look to move. Quite frankly, if you're pissed off by your boss, whoever he is, whether he's the restaurant manager or the chef or whatever, you look to move and then you come up with lots of excuses why you're moving. But the real issue is how you're managed. So picking up John's point, we must improve retention. Absolute must. And the second issue, I mean, one of the jobs I did in the past was chair the government's best practice forum, which was all about raising productivity. And we actually found that the biggest challenge in hospitality was actually a process issue. It was about improving our processes through the business and giving our staff the skills to do that. And I always mention the fact that when we compared investment in our staff in hospitality in Britain compared with Germany, for example, the very best businesses in Britain spend about 1% of their payroll investing in their staff. In Germany, it was 4%. I think that says it all. We have to spend more on developing our people, giving them the skills, looking after them, and that will help both retention and productivity. And the reason I mention these and how important it is because of the workforce we talked about in hospitality, whether it's 2.5 or 3 million people, more than 80% of that workforce are at what one might term the lowest skill level of market, just above minimum wage or living wage. And they're what I term the unsung heroes of this industry. It's the kitchen porters and the cleaners in a kitchen. It's the chambermaids in a hotel, people doing general cleaning duties. The unsung heroes. But I can tell you, if you've ever worked in a kitchen, you try running a kitchen without a kitchen porter. The kitchen grinds to a halt very quickly. Dirty glasses, dirty cutlery, you run out. If you're in a hotel and you can't find someone to clean the rooms, I can tell you, the hotel doesn't function for very long. These are the unsung heroes. They're a large part of our workforce, and they're absolutely critical to this industry and for the businesses and the way they perform. And I can tell you, it's a very simple dynamic to me. If you're running a hotel, what does a customer look for a great experience? It wants a clean bedroom above all, a good night's sleep and things that work in the room. But the clean room is paramount. And I can tell you, if you have a clean room, a satisfied customer is a returning customer, is a loyal or regular customer, and that's a profitable customer. That is the virtuous cycle. No different in a restaurant. If you've got clean cutlery, clean crockery, everything's perfectly hygienic in the restaurant, great food and service, then you have a regular customer returning. no difference to a pub or a bar. Cleanliness, it's a given and it's a fundamental, and it's sometimes underestimated. But if you get it right, you have a loyal customer base. And for a hospitality business, there is nothing more important than loyal customers, because they are profitable customers. And anyone will tell you, if you can get 75–80% of your customers to be loyal, regular customers, you will have a profitable business. So that is the virtuous circle, and that is why these unsung heroes are so important. And it's those unsung heroes who do the cleaning. Yes, they've got to be given the right training, but above all, they want the right equipment and the right products to do the job. And perhaps at that time, I'd like to hand over to...
Yes, we're going to hand over now to Renee Buchanan, our Communications Manager from Procter & Gamble, who will talk about the power of clean. Renee?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So one thing to keep in mind as we think about those unsung heroes is that they are the ones doing the jobs where the results are most visible to your guests. So the sparkling dishes, the big smile and great service, or the extra clean guest room. Every experience affects your guest perception of you, and guests are more often telling others about those experiences. Next slide. Here you can see the importance of several factors that impact people's choice of a hotel. It may be surprising to see that cleanliness tops the list, even more important than price or location. This helps drive not only guest satisfaction, but loyalty. Next slide. And not only are guests telling others about their experiences, but people are listening. So the chart on the left shows how over 90% of all bookings occur after a guest references online reviews, and this is increasing. On the right is a heat map showing the choice frequency for the 3 properties listed. And while you can't really see the names of the properties, what you can see is that the property on top is the lowest price, but it's also lower rated. The property on the bottom is higher rated, but also more expensive. Yet it is chosen more frequently by guests. Next slide. So what this means is that hotel operators can capitalize on positive ratings and reviews to drive more revenue, especially by focusing on priority areas that help increase those positive reviews, such as cleanliness. So an example of how this could work, increase your hotel's rating by just 1 point, can increase the chance of bookings at your property by 15%, including if your property price per night is up to 10% more than others in the area. Next slide. Next slide. Did it move?
Yeah. Next slide, yeah.
So this is a very similar story for restaurants. A clean food service area is one of the most important ways you can create a powerful impression, second only to the quality of the food. So quality of food first, cleanliness second. That's impactful. Next slide. And so all of this brings us to P&G Professional. Who is P&G Professional? Well, we are the away-from-home division of Procter & Gamble, and we leverage the scale of our retail business with brands that include some names you likely know and trust, like Ariel, Febreze, and Fairy. And we bring new and existing technologies to the commercial industry. For example, our Ariel professional laundry system leverages the near-neutral technology of its retail counterpart, but with added innovation to keep whites whiter and allow linens to last longer. And next slide. We've seen how important clean is to the guest experience and their desire to return. P&G Professional has over 180 years of cleaning experience, but we are more than just a cleaning product provider. P&G Professional will partner with you to create solutions to help grow your total business. Next slide. With trusted brands you and your employees know and love, a simplified lineup, often cutting out up to half of the products you use now, and effective solutions based on innovation that help create amazing guest experiences through cleanliness. Next slide. All of this is backed by the next generation of sustainable cleaning to help your business save energy, water, packaging, and costs. And on the next slide, here's an example of how P&G Professional program saved a property not only money, but important environmental resources. So the Ruffles Hotel in Scotland switched to the Ariel Professional Laundry System, and this enabled a 40% reduction in their energy usage, an 11% reduction in water usage, and a 72% reduction in their rewash rates. These are important environmental savings that also enabled cost savings. And this is just one example. We have many others. Next slide. So I just wanted to quickly thank everyone for listening and joining us today. And I'm now going to turn it back over to Daisy for our question and answer section.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Renee. That's quite some powerful message there. And I think what we've learned today is that the hospitality sector is thriving, and it's of huge value and importance to the UK economy. And moreover, that it's a people business, and if there's something that will come from Brexit, it's that we will need to refocus on people. So yes, we'd love to invite any questions that you might have for our speakers today. I'm going to kick off by asking you, Bob, what you think the main challenges the industry will face in the aftermath of Brexit.
Thanks, Sophie. Well, I think it's fairly obvious that in the first instance, until things settle down, it will be what I term the people challenge. We don't quite frankly know the shape of any Brexit deal, but there will be an impact on the availability of labour, both through official channels, through whatever visa arrangements they come up with, and perhaps even those who might be allowed to come here under a visa arrangement, whether they still want to come here. So the supply of labour, the sheer numbers that we will require, the skill levels, etc., that will be the major challenge. But I don't think we should be, as I say, too downhearted, because I always say to people, there are bigger issues for the government to get right and to worry about, and perhaps for some of the leaders of industry. But this industry has tens of thousands of small businesses. And for all those people, focus on your business. Focus on looking after your staff. Focus on supporting them and giving them the skills to do their job. You can't solve the problems of the world yourself, but you do have a responsibility on your business. So let's not get it out of perspective and focus on your business.
Thank you, Bob. And Kate, how long do you perceive it will take the industry to get back to normal?
I think that what is normal? I mean, I think what we've seen over the last 18 months, probably 2 years, is the only normal thing is uncertainty and unpredictability. And I think Bob's absolutely right. Focus on what you are doing in your own business, and you will manage to go through that period of uncertainty, because it is the new normality. I think it's difficult to predict how long it will take to get back to normal, because it's difficult at the moment to predict how disruptive Brexit will be. We know the government is listening to us. We know they are wanting to prioritise hospitality as a major employer. And we also know that they are working hard to avoid cliff edges, both when we exit in 2019 and in 2020 when we come to the end of the transition period. So it really depends on what they do about EU workers coming into the country and how long those people can stay as to how quickly it takes to get back to normality. However, yesterday, Sainsbury's made a major announcement. And they announced that on average, they were cutting the shop floor workers in their shops from 25 to 5. Now, if that happens, that short-term unemployment figure is going to start rising. In the same way, Amazon is introducing shops where there is no staff and you just go in and it's all technology-based. What we do, we don't sell products, we sell experiences. And you can only give a great experience if you've got people. So I'm confident that the hospitality sector will continue to do what it's done for so many years, be resilient, ride out the storm, and continue to invest in its people to deliver those experiences, and normality will return.
Can I just add to that? And I absolutely agree with what Kate said. And one of the reasons why government and also all the official forecasters, particularly the Treasury, always get their figures so wrong and continue to get them wrong, is because they fail to understand that business on a daily basis responds to changes of what is going on in the marketplace, the pressures on customers, the pressures on staff, and we're adapting on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. We can't wait for years for things to happen. We adapt as we go, and that is why business continues to adapt as it goes. And it has this incredible ability to respond to changes in customer changes, pressures on labour, availability of labour. We will adapt and we will respond because there's a demand for our service. And that is why I am confident. How it will work is much more difficult to forecast, but I am confident that we will have a successful future because we continue to adapt in that way.
I think that's right, Bob. It's great to hear, that it's a very adaptable and resilient industry. Do you send in any other questions that you've got? In the meantime, I'm going to ask you, John, from what we've heard, how will people cope with the changes? What will happen to the people involved in the hospitality industry?
Well, building on what Kate and Bob said, I think it's worth just sort of acknowledging the fact that unfortunately at the moment, hospitality is not really viewed by too many parents, too many careers advisors as an industry of choice, as a profession. And if you go to Germany or Austria or Switzerland, or the hotel schools of France and the Netherlands and so on, across many continental European countries, it's entirely different. And what we've got to do, and this is only going to be done really by our businesses, by our managers and business owners. Sure, it can help to have the support of the government on migration strategy, on vocational education, etc. But there's only one surefire way that we can raise the profile and the prestige of our industry. It's by the behaviour and the policies and attitudes of our owners and managers. It lies amongst us really to transform the image of hospitality as a great place to work and a great place to develop one's career. And touching upon what Bob said at the start of this webinar, what Brexit has done is has forced the people agenda right to the very top. That's what it's done. It's one of those side effects of Brexit. Nobody really talked about it during the referendum campaign, but undoubtedly, if this business is going to continue to grow at the rate that it has over the last few years, owners and managers are going to have to ensure that collectively their behaviours and their policies transform the way that hospitality is viewed by particularly people leaving school and college.
I could just take, I've always been slightly uncomfortable on viewing it as a profession, perhaps in the same way as a doctor or a dentist or a barrister or whatever, but I absolutely view it as a career, not just a job. And we really need to focus on the career opportunities that entry into the hospitality industry can bring. You can start off as a chef and end up as a managing director. You can move from hotels to restaurants to catering to leisure. You can do a whole range of activities. My own careers, I've gone from a chef to being in sales, to be communications, strategic director, government advisor, trade association, board director, whatever. It is limitless, so you can have great opportunities, but it's above all, it is a career for life, not just a job. And there are very, very few industries where you can actually start from school and be certain that you can have a career for life in one industry. I can think of many, many industries that were massive 30 years ago, no longer exist. IT or changes in the workplace have changed those industries totally. Hospitality, it's a career for life with infinite variety and great fulfillment, and everyone should be shouting that from the rooftops.
And okay.
The problem is that we can appeal to the young people. The people that we fail, and we continually fail, we fail the mum's test, and I can speak as a mum, because you want to be able to stand up and say, I've chosen to make my career in this industry, or I've chosen to do, after university, go into here. And all too often you get people saying, you could do better, or there's something else that you could do. I think as an industry, obviously we have a lot of the foot soldiers, but we also have careers for lawyers, marketeers, graphic designers, architects. That's what we need to be able to communicate better. And I think, as John said, Brexit has given us the opportunity to do that. Government is keen to work with us. So we will be putting in place a major strategy to transform the way in which we communicate to our school children, to our graduates, and to the wider population as a whole, industry of choice, career of choice, and the opportunities that are available.
Thank you, Kate. And we're getting a number of questions through from our listeners today on the image, the poor image that hospitality industry actually faces in the UK. So what needs to be done to attract more people to enter the sector to actually have a career rather than just to earn wages? And is there anything we can learn from the US in terms of recruiting and retaining team members? And are we sexy enough as a career option when most young people, look to work for brands rather than specific roles?
I think one thing we can do, and other industries have been much more successful when you actually work collectively as an industry to promote your industry as a great career. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, you might remember there was an enormous television advert on behalf of the banking industry. It wasn't Barclays or Midland or NatWest running the ads. It was the banking industry. Yes, from America, the trade association over there, the NRA, does a great job representing the industry. And I look to UK hospitality and our new trade association. We have to bang the drum, and the big companies particularly have to work together, not in competition, promoting this industry as a great career opportunity. It's about collectively working together, and that's the secret. It's a little bit of working together, not separate in silos.
Yeah, and that is top of my in tray from coming in to take over UK hospitality. That is why the Trade Association has been created, to bring the whole of the industry together to speak with one voice on these important issues. I find it quite shocking when I went to do a careers talk in school, and it only needs 300 of us to go around and hit every high school in the country. I went to do a careers talk. We do not have a generic piece of information to sell hospitality as a career. The other people there had a retail leaflet, a construction leaflet. We're the third largest employer. We should have our marketing materials spot on, in speaking in a language that young people want to hear, using social media to communicate what a fun place it is to work, because it's a fantastic place to work. And I went over took a study tour to Las Vegas. They have a big hospitality industry. They have a Culinary Institute of Las Vegas where everybody goes to train. And there is a culture there that if you want to be and have the best jobs in the industry, you start at the bottom and you work your way up. And we need to communicate that, but we also need to communicate that you can go in at the top and you can start at any level within hospitality, because we will train you and we will give you those transferable skills. So yes, it is a huge challenge, and yes, it's one we will be dealing with.
Thank you, Kate. And John, I have a question for you from one of our listeners today on the place for universities in the UK in relation to the hospitality workforce. You mentioned that there's been too much focus on the academic aspects versus vocational in the UK when it comes to universities, and would love to know your thoughts on that.
I think one thing I would say is that the number of people who are applying to do sort of hospitality degrees, hotel management degrees in the UK has unfortunately been declining. And one of the reasons I think why they have been in decline is because of the emergence of tuition fees. So when the person graduates and has to start repaying their £50,000 of debt once they've hit, at the moment, £21,000, it's quite a burden. And unfortunately, they're not seeing sufficient salary growth within their job as a supervisor, as a departmental manager, and they're faced with this enormous amount of debt. So one of the things that we're pushing, along with other sectors to be fair, is something called degree-level apprenticeships, where you combine the academic learning with real practical experience in the place of work. And degree apprenticeships would leave the individual not only earning money during the 2 or 3 year degree, so a salary, but also would not incur the tuition fee at the end of it. And they'd come out with this sort of merged degree, which would be of much, much more value for the industry. And one of the things we're interested in is organisations, company paying the apprenticeship levy, being able to use their digital account to pay for the residential accommodation costs of such a degree apprenticeship. And that's something that the levy can't be used for at the moment, and that's an idea that we're quite interested in supporting.
Thank you very much, John. Well, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today, and thank you very much to everyone who sent in their questions. If you do have any further questions, please do feel free to get in touch with us. The email address is up on your screen there. And also, please remember that the webinar will be available if you wanted to listen to it again on the BHA website, and please do share with anybody else within your industries and workforces. Thank you so much to all of our speakers today. I think it's been a fascinating hour, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.